Welcome to the Big L, your unofficial source for Libertarian Party news, arcana, and information for the liberty-minded political junkie. Find us at BigLPodcast.com. Here's your host, Libertarian Party insider and the pink flame of liberty, Caryn Ann.
All righty, here we are back to discuss part 2 of why I am an anarchist and why you should be one too. And why ultimately it really doesn't matter all that much. Before we get started, I would like to sincerely thank the patrons of this show. Let's go down my list here. We have Cole Euchre, David Jeffries, Catherine Iverson, and Tom Knapp. And also would like to welcome so much our top tier patrons, which is the newest one is Guy Rosenbaum. And we also have Ken Bates and Randy Hoggard. Thank you. Each time I get these notifications, I'm so grateful and humbled, and it helps make this all possible. Please, please, if you are listening and you find value, live the spirit of voluntary payment and become a patron today. The link obviously will be in the show notes. And I did not yet get any new iTunes review. Wish you could see sad. I'm doing the little tears sad face. So that is another way. It would just take you a few moments of your time and you could boost my day. But there is another way that you can substantially help that will not cost you a thing. If you already regularly shop Amazon, would you please start your searches using one of my affiliate links in the show notes? Anything you buy during that cookie session will be credited as an affiliate sale. And Amazon just sent me a scolding email saying my affiliate account will be canceled because I haven't had any activity. So please don't let me get canceled. Pretty in pink, please. Now back to the topic. I am, of course, being a bit cheeky when I say it really doesn't matter whether or not you choose to be right and agree with me. But that depends upon the disagreements. Obviously, it really does. But what I mean and who specifically I am imploring here are the rare, the few, the exotic, actual minarchists that remain in this allegedly minarchist libertarian party. You are a rare unicorn, my friend. You are like the children of the forest in the Game of Thrones, and it should not be so. To explain that point, I would like to read you something from Brian Kaplan, linked to his full article in the show notes. And I would like you to go check it out because there are some really astute observations made in the comments to that article. But here is what Mr. Kaplan had to say. In the 70s and 80s, a great intellectual battle waged between two libertarian factions, minarchist and anarcho-capitalists. In 1974, the Libertarian Party papered over the dispute with one of the oddest compromises in political history, the Dallas Accord. Under its terms, the LP platform remained silent on the very question of whether the government should exist. Since then, libertarians have definitely moderated. But as far as I can tell, the moderation led to the near demise not of anarcho-capitalism, but of minarchism. I have no data, but I do have decades of daily libertarian interaction under my belt. It has literally been years since I've heard a libertarian self-identify as a minarchist. It's not just semantic. It's also been years since I've heard a libertarian say government should provide police, courts, national defense, and nothing else. Instead, most libertarians now have a long and broad list of exceptions to libertarian principles. Everything from banning discrimination, to fighting contagious disease, to building roads, to providing a social safety net. The libertarians who oppose all of these deviations are now typically anarcho-capitalists, not minarchists. The result, as far as I can tell, is that anarcho-capitalism has become the modal libertarian position. It has a smaller market share than in the 70s, but zero is focal in a way that minimal isn't. More moderate libertarians have fanned out to embrace a vast range of ideas, but no specific moderate position now predominates. And I think this is profound in a way, but it's something that I don't think we routinely think about. And one might think this is simply the thick versus thin libertarian debate. But it really isn't. Adding coercion is not thickness. For a quick summary of the thick versus thin little categorization, and this is, of course, brief. A thin libertarian believes that libertarianism is only about the non-aggression principle, full stop. A thick libertarian will concede that the nap is necessary, but other things must be joined to it in order to be consistent. But it's not usually coercive things. Well, not coercive things at all. It is usually things such as feminism or other social theories. So, in light of this observation, if you also accept it, minarchists are completely suicidal to be fighting with anarcho-capitalists. We are more than kissing cousins. We are cousins that have 10 inbred children together when compared to the predominant minarchism plus. The plus side will tolerate you as against the anarchists, but if we were gone, you are the next extremists, and we outnumber you. Let's get unemotional and down to actual brass tacks. What precisely is the difference between us being the actual minarchists and the anarcho-capitalists such as myself? Your first reaction may be that this is a profoundly idiotic question, but is it? Try to answer it simply. I have pondered this long and hard. That's for you, Jay North. And to my amazement, I have found that this difference is trivial, so trivial to be basically non-existent in light of our present reality. And this brings me back to another Jay North reference. Jay, Susan Hogarth, and Mark Montoni are the ones that led me to this dark side when I was new and naive. Jay was lying in wait for me at the Libertarian Party of Douglas County, Colorado meetings to pounce on me with his anarchy babble, and I would mansplain. Get it? Okay, you get it. How blah, blah, blah. The minute you enforced your rights, you would have a de facto government. And then I would look at him smugly. He would look at me exasperated. And this would continue week after week. And as it turns out, we were both right and talking past each other like farts that passed in the night. Not my best analogy. So, how was I right? Well, governments are indeed inevitable. One has to be a special kind of deluded or an envisioning a world with a population of less than one's fingers or toes not to realize this. But Jay was also right. And how is that? That is because essentially government has nothing to do with libertarian anarchy. That sometimes throws people for a major loop because, well, let's put it this way. Technically, it has nothing to do with it, but we will fall victim to the elasticity and ambiguities of words. But there is a reason why we say statist rather than gov lover or something similar. So I kind of like that one. I don't think it'll catch on, though. The technically correct term for what we oppose well, those of you who agree with me and are right, as libertarian anarchists, is the state. The state is not coextensive with government. Repeat after me. The state is not coextensive with government. All states govern, but not all governments are states. The key characteristic of a state, as opposed to a government, are essential territorial boundaries and the monopoly on the justified use or allegedly justified use of defensive force. Governments require neither of those things. Quoting a bit from C.J. Engel, and I will link to his works, though he is a hoppy, is it hoppy? I always get it wrong. A hoppy, whatever, hippity hoppity, get off my property fan, and that gives me hives. I will start the quote. It is of utmost importance to constantly remind the reader that there is a necessary difference between the state and government in a variety of ways. The state I define, as Rothbard famously did, as the organization of robbery systemized and writ large. Now, government is a bit different, for all societies have a government in some sense. Indeed, all communities have something that plays the role of governance. Corporations have a governance structure, and so do churches. A Rothbardian or Hoppian proprietarian society, too, would have rules, even if their enforcement existed on the free market. Stefan Kinsella is one of the few Misesians, that is a mouthful, who constantly reminds his readers of the difference between the two. At one point writing, Albert J. Nock was also influenced by Franz Oppenheimer in Our Enemy, the State. He explains the antisocial, predatory nature of the state and draws a sharp distinction between government as a voluntary acknowledged authority and the state. The voluntarily acknowledged authority as government is decent, at least for our present purposes. The point here is that the government works with the society and the state works against it. Thus, it is my own description that whereas government is a role in society, the state is an institution that forces itself upon the people. Where there is a state, this state takes up the role of government as part of its activity. Thus, all states necessarily govern, but not all governments are states. And that's the end of the quote from CJ, who also, I'm going to quote him again very briefly, he reminds us of thoughts of Rothbard. For it should never be forgotten that a libertarian society does not mean the total absence of coercion, but only the absence of coercion against non-criminals. Those who invade the rights of others by violence deserve their proper check and punishment by force of the law. Alrighty. Thus, libertarian anarchy is maybe more aptly called voluntarism or even autoarchism. Rothbard briefly flirted with the term non-archy, but as you can see, there are still rules and laws require enforcement, and enforcement is government. That is inevitable. So, this tiny thread upon which libertarian anarchists and minarchists disagree is simply this: the necessity or justness of a territorial enforced monopoly on rights protection and defense. And in some cases, looking from the outside at a frozen moment in time, the two can be nearly indistinguishable, as parts of early America was. So I ask, on the ideological principle front, is this really worth battling over at this time? It is about as obscure as infralapsarianism versus supralapsarianism, another mouthful, and the Philoic in Christian debate. And I love mangling words. On the practical point, it is completely irrelevant to the world today. As Nolan pointed out, to even discuss, we both have to use desert island or fictional ideal societies as examples. But yes, let's fiddle while Rome burns. Let's avoid the cliff, okay, before deciding if morning or afternoon hikes are better. Zero aggression is impossible right now. Simply is. We need to mitigate, and we both agree on what needs to be mitigated until we get to that last scrap. And I suspect if we got there, something new and emerging would come out of it that would please both of us. This is a much shorter episode than typical, and I'm starting to think of a little bit of a rearrangement of this show where I think we will start each time, no matter what the ultimate topic is, with some regular Libertarian Party-centric updates, the internal water cooler talk of the party. I've got some ideas for sure, and certainly William Weld gave us some, fodder for discussion. Hit me up with your ideas, but, hit me up non-violently, of course. And I'm thinking that would be a good way forward for the future. So, for instance, if we had done this time, the first part of the show would be discussing the breaking news type things, and then we would move on to the longer topic. Let me know what you think. And until next time, have an awesome day. Mi guapas de libertad.
Thank you for listening to The Big L, where size does matter. Subscribe today and help support the show by going to BigLPodcast.com. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.
I must take this time to disseminate the appropriate disclaimers and advisories. If it pleases the Crown, while I am an officer of the National Libertarian Party and have in fact sold my soul to the blessed chicken on a stick, all opinions, perspectives, rants, jokes, and outbursts of any and all kinds are solely me speaking on my own behalf and not on behalf of the party. I am not the party spokesperson, just a fanatic who happens to hold a position. Before anything else, I am a liberty activist, just like you. And if you call me a politician, I die a little inside. Thank you.